3 days after my triple bypass, I sent a message to the family group chat. Just one line, "Doctor says I can go home tomorrow morning. Can someone come get me?" My son read it. I could see the little check mark turn. He read it and said nothing for 11 minutes. Then, "Dad, we've got stuff going on this weekend. Can't you just get a lift or something?" His wife typed right after him before I could even respond. "The hospital probably has a discharge service. Ask the nurses." I put the phone face down on the blanket and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The ceiling had one of those water stains that looks like something if you stare at it long enough. I stared at it for maybe 20 minutes. A nurse named Claudette came in to check my IV line and asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. She looked at my face and didn't say anything, just patted my hand once before she left. "I want you to understand something before I go further. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years working for a manufacturing company outside of Columbus, Ohio. Quality control, then floor supervisor, then regional operations manager. I worked overtime when my son was in Little League so we could afford the good glove, the one he wanted. I drove my daughter-in-law to her first job interview because her car had a busted alternator and my son was at work. I co-signed on their first apartment when they needed the down payment for the house they're living in right now. The one on Pembroke Drive with the 2-car garage and the backyard my grandson plays in. I wrote a check for $40,000 and told them to pay me back when they could. They haven't paid back a cent. I never asked twice. So when I read that message, "Can't you just get a lift or something?" I didn't get angry. That's what people expect me to say, that I was furious. But I wasn't. I was just quiet inside. Like when you drop something fragile and you hear it hit the floor and you already know before you look. I called the cab company the next morning. The driver's name was a man in his late 50s, heavyset, a Cleveland Browns air freshener hanging from the mirror. He helped me with my overnight bag without being asked. When I got in slowly, triple bypass recovery means every movement is deliberate. Every sit-down is a small negotiation with your own chest. He just waited. Didn't make a face. Didn't say anything impatient. "Rough week," he said, bowling out of the hospital lot. "You could say that," I said. "I got you," he said. And that was it. That was enough. His name was Vincent. I found that out later when I called the cab company to leave a good review. I want to remember his name because kindness from a stranger lands differently when your own family has just shown you exactly who they are. Now let me back up, because this story didn't start with the surgery. It started about 8 months before, when my wife Barbara passed away. Barbara and I have been married for 41 years. She was the one who kept the peace in the family. She was the one who remembered birthdays and made the phone calls and smoothed things over when my son and I had our silences. After she died, ovarian cancer, it moved fast, 4 months from diagnosis to funeral. I realized how much weight she had been carrying that I never saw. My son Nathan and his wife Corinne moved into my house 6 weeks after the funeral. They said it was to help me. I believed them, because I wanted to believe them, because grief makes you want to believe things. It took about 3 months for me to understand what was actually happening. They stopped paying rent on their own place. I found out by accident when their landlord called my number. Apparently, I was still listed as an emergency contact from years ago. I covered that month's rent because I didn't want Nathan's credit to take a hit. I told myself it was a one-time thing. It wasn't a one-time thing. Corinne started talking about eventually, and when the house becomes more of a family home. Little comments, offhand, the kind of thing that sounds innocent if you're not listening carefully. Nathan got quieter around me, which with Nathan usually means he's waiting for something. I started paying attention. I have an attorney, a man named, I'll call him my attorney because he's a private man and I don't share his name loosely. I've had him since I sold my share of a small business back in 2009. He's careful, thorough, and he doesn't waste words. I called him in February, 4 months before the surgery, and told him I needed to review some things. My will, the house, some accounts I'd been meaning to restructure anyway. He said, "Talk to me." I talked to him for 2 hours. The surgery was scheduled. I have a condition called aortic stenosis. The valve narrows, the heart has to work harder. Eventually, it fails if you don't fix it. They'd been watching mine for 2 years, and last spring, my cardiologist said it was time. Triple bypass, valve replacement. Not an emergency, but not optional either. I told Nathan and Corinne 3 weeks before the scheduled date. Corinne asked if they'd need to move out while I was recovering. Not, is there anything we can do? Not, we'll be there the whole time. Just, would they need to move? I told her no. Recovery at home would actually be better with people around. She nodded like I'd given an acceptable answer to a practical question. Nathan said he'd drive me to the hospital the morning of. I told him I appreciated that. He drove me, dropped me at the entrance, and said he'd be back when I called. He didn't park. He didn't come in. He had his hazard lights on like he was doing a grocery run. I checked in alone. I won't describe the surgery itself because I wasn't awake for it, obviously. I woke up in the ICU with tubes and monitors, and a nurse named someone I couldn't read the badge of because my glasses were in my bag. The first day was mostly pain management and confusion. The second day I could think more clearly. By the third day I was sitting up, taking short walks down the hall with a physical therapist, and trying to figure out my own family. I called Nathan on day 2. He answered on the 4th ring. "Hey, Dad, how's it going?" I told him the surgery went well. He said, "Good, good." There was a baseball game on in the background. I could hear the announcer. I could hear Corinne say something I couldn't make out, and Nathan laugh at it. "You going to come by?" I asked. "We'll try to get up there, Dad. It's just, it's been a hectic week. A hectic week. I'd had my chest opened up and a valve replaced." He'd had a hectic week. "Okay," I said. They didn't come. On day 3, I sent the group chat message. You already know how that went. Vincent dropped me at the house on Pembroke Drive. My house, I want to be precise about that, and helped me up the front steps. I tipped him well. He told me to take care of myself. I told him the same. Nathan opened the door before I could get my key out. He looked surprised to see me, which I thought was strange since I had told them I was coming home. "Dad, you made it okay?" "I made it okay," I said. Corinne appeared behind him. She smiled the smile she uses when she needs something. "We were just worried about you," she said. "You should have called. We would have." "I did call," I said. "I texted. You both saw it." Nobody said anything for a moment. "Well, you're home now," Nathan said. "Come on in. You must be exhausted." I was exhausted. I let them guide me to the recliner in the living room. I let Corinne bring me water and a blanket. I let Nathan sit across from me with an expression I'd been watching for months. Attentive, careful, waiting. The thing they were waiting for was my briefcase. I'd had it with me at the hospital. Black, leather, combination lock, not particularly remarkable looking. I'd had her for 20 years. Barbara gave it to me for our anniversary. Nathan's eyes went to it the moment I sat down, then to me, then back to the briefcase. He thought I didn't notice. He was wrong. "You must be tired from the ride," Corinne said. "Can I make you some tea? Or maybe something to eat?" I told her tea would be nice. While she was in the kitchen, Nathan leaned forward. "Hey, Dad, everything's squared away with... while you were in the hospital, did you have a chance to talk to anybody about the estate stuff?" There it was. I looked at my son for a long moment. I had known him his whole life. I had watched him take his first steps in the kitchen of our old house on Millbrook Avenue. I had sat with him in the emergency room when he broke his arm falling off a bike, and he was 11 years old and crying, and I held his hand and told him it was going to be okay, and I meant every word. "What kind of estate stuff?" I said. He shifted in his chair. "Just, the house, the accounts, now that Mom's gone, it's all kind of up in the air." "I have a will," I said. "I've always had a will." "Right, but that was written a long time ago. Things change." Corinne and I were thinking. He stopped. "We just want to make sure you're taken care of. That's all." Corinne came back with the tea. She set it down gently, the way people do when they're being careful. I thanked her. I drank some tea. I told them I was very tired and needed to rest. Nathan said, "Of course, of course." Over the next 4 days, they were attentive in a way they had never been in the 2 years I'd known Corinne, and in the years since Nathan became the kind of son who remembered to call on Father's Day, but not much else. They brought me meals. They kept the television low. They asked how I was feeling with a regularity that would have been touching if I hadn't been watching where their eyes went every time I set the briefcase down somewhere. On the third evening, Nathan sat with me after dinner. "Dad," he said, "I don't want to push you on this, but with everything that happened, the surgery and losing Mom, I think we need to have a real conversation about the future." "What about the future?" "The house," he said. "Corinne and I have been here helping you for months now. We've given up a lot. We thought that we just thought it would make sense to talk about putting our names on the deed for continuity, so that if anything happened, there wouldn't be any legal complications." I looked at the ceiling. Different ceiling than the hospital one, but I did the same thing, just looked up for a moment. "You want me to add your name to my house," I said. "It makes sense financially, Nathan." I said his name quietly and he stopped. "I need to sleep. We'll talk about it." He nodded. He was pleased. "We'll talk about it." He nodded. He was pleased. He thought the conversation had gone well. What my son did not know, what neither of them knew, was what I had done during those 4 days in the hospital while they didn't visit. I hadn't just been recovering. The hospital has a business center on the second floor, near the family waiting areas. On day 2, when I was walking the halls with the physical therapist, I asked her if we could do one of our laps past there. She said that was fine. I looked at the hours posted on the door. On day 3, when I was cleared for short independent walks, I went to the business center with my attorney's number in my pocket. I used their computer. I made 3 phone calls. I sent 2 emails. I had started planning this in February. The hospital stay just gave me the time I needed to finish it. The first thing I had done back in February was talk to my attorney about what's called a revocable living trust. When you transfer your assets, your house, your accounts, your investments, into a trust, those assets don't pass through your will when you die. They go directly to whoever you've named as the beneficiary of the trust. More importantly, you remain in control of everything while you're alive. You can change the terms any time. I transferred the house into the trust in March. Nathan's name was not in the trust. Corinne's name was not in the trust. The second thing I did was talk to my financial advisor. I have a brokerage account, an IRA, and a savings account that Barbara and I built over 30 years of careful, modest living. I updated the beneficiary designations on all of them. These designations supersede a will entirely. The money goes where you name it, period. I named a charity that runs after-school programs in the Columbus area. Barbara volunteered there for 11 years. She would have liked that. The third thing I did, and this is the one that required the hospital business center, was finalize an arrangement I'd been setting up with a property manager. The house on Pembroke Drive was being transferred into the trust. That trust had specific terms that my attorney had very carefully drafted. Terms that said, in simple language, any person residing in the property who is not the trust's primary beneficiary must vacate within 60 days upon request of the trustee. I was the trustee. On the 4th day home, Nathan came to me again. He had a document. He'd had Corinne type it up. I could tell by the font. She always used Georgia. She'd used it on every birthday card they'd ever sent that was printed off a computer. It was a quitclaim deed. Unsigned, obviously, because my signature was what he needed. "Dad, I just thought if you looked it over." I took the document. I looked at it for a moment, then I set it down on the side table next to my tea. "Nathan," I said, "I need to tell you something." He sat down. He had the look of a man who thinks things are going his way. "I've already made arrangements for the house," I said, "and for my accounts. I took care of all of it." Something shifted in his face. "What kind of arrangements?" "Everything has been moved into a trust. The house, the accounts, it's been done since March." I paused, "And the trust has a residency clause. I've asked my attorney to send you the formal notice this week. You and Corinne will have 60 days. The room was very quiet. "60 days," Nathan said. "That's right." "Dad." He stood up. "Dad." He stood up. "Dad, you can't just—" "I can," I said. "It's my house, Nathan. It has always been my house." Corinne appeared in the doorway. She must have been listening. Her face had gone the color of old paper. "What about everything we did for you?" she said. "We'd been here for months." "You moved in 6 weeks after my wife died," I said. You stopped paying rent on your apartment and let me cover it. You've lived here for free. I have the numbers. I've kept records of all of it. I let that sit for a moment. I don't think what you did for me adds up to what you were hoping to inherit." Nathan sat down again. He put his hands over his face. I almost felt sorry for him. I said, "Almost." "I'm not trying to punish you," I said, and I meant it, "but I watched what happened to your mother, and I watched what happened after she was gone, and I decided I wasn't going to let grief make me foolish twice." I looked at him. "You told me to call a lift from the hospital." He didn't say anything. "You read my message, and then you watched a baseball game." Still nothing. "You are my son," I said. "I love you. I've always loved you. That doesn't change. But love doesn't mean I hand you the deed to my house as a reward for 2 months of making me dinner." They left 9 days later. Not the full 69 days. I think Corinne pushed it. She was already calling people, already making plans, and I think she wanted to be out before the formal notice arrived so she could tell her version of the story first. Nathan came to talk to me the morning they were loading the truck. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen the way he used to stand in the doorway of my workshop when he was a kid, and he'd done something and he wasn't sure if I knew. "Dad," he said, "I'm sorry about the hospital." I looked up from my coffee. "I should have come," he said. "I should have come and I didn't, and He stopped. "I don't really have an explanation for it." I nodded. I told him I heard him. He left. The truck pulled out at about 10 in the morning. I watched it go from the front window. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that because I think that's what people expect from a story like this. They expect me to feel like I won something. But what I felt was tired and sad, and something that took me a few days to put a name to. What I felt was clarity, like a window that's been filmed over for years and someone finally cleaned it. Not pleasant exactly, just clear. That afternoon, I called my friend James. We've been friends since 1987, worked together at the plant, and I told him I needed to get out of the house. We drove out to Griggs Reservoir and walked the path along the water for about 40 minutes, which is about all my chest can handle these days. James didn't ask a lot of questions. He knows me well enough to know when I need to talk and when I need to just walk. When we got back to the cars, he said, "You doing okay?" I thought about it honestly. "I think I'm going to be," I said. He nodded. "Barbara would have handled that whole thing a lot more gracefully than you." "She would have," I agreed. "She was better at people than I am." "You're not so bad," he said. I drove home to my house that sits in a trust with my name on it. I made dinner. Nothing complicated, just soup from a can and bread from the freezer. And I sat in the recliner where I'd sat 4 days earlier while my son's eyes moved between my face and my briefcase. I thought about the $40,000 I'd given them for the down payment on a house that was never mine to live in. I thought about Claudette, the nurse who patted my hand. I thought about Vincent and his Cleveland Browns air freshener. I thought about Barbara, who would have found a better way through all of this, a kinder way, and who I miss every single morning when I make coffee for one. I'm not a man who needs much. I never was. I need the house to be quiet in the evenings. I need to walk by the water when the weather's good. I need to know that what I built over 40 years wasn't just sitting there waiting to be taken. That's all I needed. And now I have it. I've had a lot of time to sit with this, and here's what I keep coming back to. None of what happened was sudden. Not the surgery, not what Nathan and Corinne did, and not what I did about it. Everything took years to become what it was. That's the part people miss when they hear a story like this. They think there's one moment that changes everything. There isn't. There are 100 small moments, and you either pay attention to them or you don't. I paid attention late. That's on me. For a long time, I told myself that the distance between me and my son was just the natural order of things. Kids grow up, they get busy, they have their own lives. And that's true up to a point. but there's a line between building your own life and treating your father like a problem to be managed. Nathan crossed that line a long time before the surgery. I just kept finding reasons not to see it clearly. What finally made it clear wasn't the message in the group chat, as much as that stung. It was what came after. It was sitting in that hospital recliner, watching his eyes move to my briefcase. It was Corinne's question, not, "Are you okay?" but, "Will we need to move out?" It was the document she typed up in Georgia font, neat and ready, like they'd been waiting for the right moment to slide it across to me. That's when I understood. They hadn't come to take care of me. They had come to wait me out. And here's the thing about that kind of patience, the kind that's really just calculation. It tends to make people careless. When you're only watching for one thing, you stop noticing everything else. Nathan watched for the briefcase. He never thought to ask what I'd been doing in February. He never asked why I'd called my attorney. He assumed that grief and age had made me soft, and that assumption cost him. I don't say that with any satisfaction. I want to be careful about that. My son is not a villain in a story. He's a man who let something in him, call it entitlement, call it fear, call it not enough hard years, talk him into believing that what I'd built was already, in some sense, his. That's a failure of character, but it's also a failure I had some hand in. I gave too easily and too quietly for too long, and I never made him work for the things that should have required work. That's the part that keeps me up some nights, not what they tried to take. What I failed to build in him by never letting him feel the weight of anything. What I know now is this: getting older doesn't mean getting weaker in the ways that matter. It means you finally have enough information to act with precision. I had 40 years of information. I had the records, the dates, the account numbers, the attorney who knew exactly what I needed. All that time I spent working, paying attention, keeping careful track. That was the thing they couldn't take, because they didn't even know it existed. Resilience isn't about refusing to get hurt. I got hurt. I sat in that hospital room alone for 3 days, and I felt every bit of it. Resilience is what you do after that, whether you let the hurt make you passive or whether you let it make you precise. I chose precise, and I think Barbara would have understood that, even if she would have found a softer way to say it.